All right, it's 10 past the hour.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll get started. I guess, I don't know, I can just leave this poll up for now. I don't think it hurts to leave it up. Okay, so hello, everyone. I assume you all know where you are at, hopefully. So this is a workshop on using R Markdowns to publish your research as reports, primarily. And so before we get started, the only software tools that you'll need for this workshop are Rstudio and then the R package Rmarkdown. So if you haven't had a chance yet to install any of that, hopefully you've already been using R and Rstudio. If you're here, because that was one of the sort of the prerequisites, is some knowledge of R. But then additionally, the R package Rmarkdown would be good to have. One of the things we like to do in our workshops are encourage folks to turn on your cameras and then unmute yourself regularly to ask questions and such. So, I mean, don't feel pressured if you have, if there's reasons you can't turn your video on, but it is helpful for teaching purposes to not teach to a bunch of like little black squares on the screen. So if you're comfortable having your video on, that is really appreciated. And then, yeah, one of the things that I will probably use in this workshop to get feedback from y'all about how fast or slow I'm going, or if you're struggling with something or it's going well, are the reactions in Zoom. So if you on your Zoom panel at the bottom, you should have a button for reactions. And if you click on that, there should be, well, there's a handful of emojis and things like that, but the ones that we usually tend to use are, there's a green check mark and then a red X. And so I'll periodically, yes, what Heidi just said, I'll periodically ask if folks can do a green check if they're doing well, and then do a red X if you need me to stop or need to ask questions or whatever. So yeah, so if you haven't used those before, go ahead, feel free to click on them. Yeah, but it's just a nice way to get some visual feedback about how everyone's doing. Because this is supposed to be very interactive. I want you to get the most out of this possible. If something is confusing or you need me to repeat something or slow down, definitely like interrupt me at any time you have questions or anything like that. This is for you primarily. So yes. Okay, I think that's all the sort of beginning intro setup stuff. So just to really briefly introduce myself and helpers and sort of our group. And then I'll have y'all introduce yourselves briefly. And then we will launch into talking about what our markdowns are and what you can use them for. So I am Kristina Riemer. I'm the one primarily teaching this workshop. I am an ecologist turned data scientist, I guess is probably the best description. And the group that I'm in is the CCT data science team. And I'll actually share our this is our website. So we are a group that primarily helps out researchers who are in CALS or in ALVSCE, that division. And yeah, so basically our purpose on campus is to help people learn new data science skills and apply them to their research. We also do a lot of collaborations with folks where we actually help them create computational tools or improve their data management or learn skills that we are experts in teaching. And then also hosting workshops like the one that you're at right now. So we have these workshops at least once a month, and then we have other workshop offerings that are more extensive. So yeah, if you want to check out our website, I guess I can share this link in the Zoom chat. If I can find the button, there it is. So yeah, and if our helpers want to introduce themselves, you want to go first, Jessica? Real quick.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Guo. I work with Kristina in the CCT data science team, and we run, we work on a variety of things together. It is always my pleasure to learn from and teach with Kristina. So if you guys, speak up, unmute yourselves and get on camera, and feel free. This is just a small group today. So.
Heidi, do you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, Absolutely. Hey, everybody, I'm Heidi. I apologize for not having my camera on yet. I joined from some bad Wi-Fi and I'm navigating to some better, and I will be there in a second for all of my active learning expressions. I work at the Data Science Institute as an educator, and I'm passionate about R programming, but most especially the tidyverse and reproducible workflows within R. So if you have questions and other workshop availability, check out the Data Science Institute's event page as well. And thanks so much for having me here, Kristina. I'm happy to learn from you.
Well, and thanks for being here and for helping with your R Markdown expertise for sure. Okay, excellent. So that's everyone who's here running the workshop. Feel free to stop and ask us, any of us, questions at any time. And then if you all want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, just very briefly, if you want to tell us your name, what department or group you're in at UA, and then maybe talk about what you would like to use R Markdown for. And if you don't know and you just want to learn something new, that's totally fine. So I can call out people based on the order on my screen, except it doesn't show me people's names. So that's really not very helpful. There we go. Essa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Isa Ali, and I graduated from Second Language Acquisition and Teaching Program, PhD, about like 3 years ago. I am now in Saudi Arabia teaching here, and I'm really passionate about R and R codes, and I use it for my research papers and so on. And from time to time, I attend Oliver's workshops, especially when it was online, when I have time. So I am very excited about this workshop, and thank you for offering it online through Zoom.
Okay, awesome, great. It's good to get good feedback on the virtual format. We've been doing this for a couple of years now this way, and hope to keep doing at least some virtual offerings. So it's good to know that's helpful for some people. Awesome. Juvie, I'm sorry if I mispronounced folks' names. If you want to just unmute yourself and introduce yourself, then I don't have to mangle anybody's name. But Juvie?
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hi, I'm from the Clinical and Translational Science PhD program. So it's my first semester. And I basically just want to be familiar with R because I haven't taken R course yet, although I have the research analytics course before with an introductory view for the R script. I probably would be handling some proteomics data later on in my rotation. That's why I am really interested to learn R.
Awesome, great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we would have had people from the clinical and translational sciences attend some of our workshops before, so.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any resources on our side of campus. This is so wonderful to see people, starting to realize the data science.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's good. Got to get across all campus. Awesome, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity too.
Yeah. Savannah is next on my list.
Hi, everyone. I am a second-year PhD student in clinical psychology. I was previously a graduate student in CALS in family studies and human development, and I finished my master's there and then went to clinical. And I do a lot of pre-registered analyses, and I'd like to start including an R Markdown file with those submissions. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. I love this pre-registration of experimental stuff. I know it's not really common in my field, but it seems like a really good place to be heading. So hopefully this will be useful for that.
Savannah, I have questions for you. Maybe we can chat later off.
Definitely.
After the recording, because family and consumer sciences is one of the departments in CALS where like, we don't really know what that is because it's just so distant from ecology and plants and animals and stuff that it's like, yeah, we would love to speak with people and see like what kinds of research do people do? What kinds of data science needs do they even have? We haven't quite found a way to ask those questions yet. And so, I'm
definitely
excited.
I'm happy to talk to you. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And the last person on the list is, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know how you pronounce it.
It's a shell course. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Great. Hello everyone, my name is Xiaokuan Ma. So I'm right now a postdoc, so working at the College of Medicine Phoenix campus. So we are doing some neuroscience research right now, and we plan to do some RNA sequence experiment. So we plan to use R to do the data analysis. So I'm the beginner of R, so great to finally it's great to join you. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know if we've had anyone from College of Medicine that we've interacted with yet, from what I recall. So lots of new areas on campus for us that we're trying to reach out to. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Okay, awesome. So I think that was everyone. Yes, that was everyone who's here. Okay, so let's see here. Let me get oriented. Got too many things on my screen. Okay, yep. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and jump right into it. I'm gonna go through what R Markdown is and when you can use it. We'll all walk through creating an R Markdown, an example R Markdown together. And then I will walk through showing everyone how to publish our Markdowns in a couple different ways. And then we should hopefully have some time at the end for folks to take some of your own R scripts and turn it into an R Markdown and hopefully publish it. So yeah, hopefully, ideally by the end of this session, the most ideal, as long as everything goes well, is that everyone will have a published R Markdown of their own work. I am sharing the right screen, right? It's the data science. You can see the data science. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so what is R Markdown? Basically, what R Markdown does is it's a way that you can combine text, formatted text with code, like our code, and the outputs from your code, so figures and things like that. And so this process of combining text along with code is what is referred to as literate programming. And this is a really, really useful tool for then documenting your code and being able to provide reports for people. Or also, some people also use R Markdown to write manuscripts. It can be a pretty good vehicle for that because you can combine formatted text along with your code outputs. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead and start off by showing an example of an R Markdown, a published R Markdown. This is one of my R Markdowns that I've created. So yeah, so this is what an R Markdown can look like. This was an R Markdown I created as part of some data exploration for an NSF project that we're on. And this in particular, I published on RPubs. And so we'll talk about publishing on RPubs and Rstudioconnect a little bit later on. But you can see this is a pretty good example of what I'm talking about with combining text and code. So you can see there's descriptive text about what I did, along with these gray boxes that show R code. And then actually some of this R code was actually used to produce, there's a table right here that has some data in it that I was summarizing. And so this table was produced by this code. And then also I did a little bit of plotting of my data. So this is spatial data in particular. And this plot right here was generated by this chunk of code. And so R Markdown is great. It's super useful for this purpose of basically documenting the work you've done and providing it in a pretty nice, easy to look at format, especially if you're working with people who are not as technically savvy as y'all are. And it's a good way of combining a lot of different R outputs. Okay, so why might you do something, create something like what I have here? Why would you want to create an R Markdown? This is a really great way, as I said before, for sharing your work with people. So like sharing your work with advisors or bosses or other collaborators so they can see what you've done in a well commented way, basically. Additionally, it's really nice to put together these R Markdowns for your future self. So I have many times worked on a project and then for whatever reason had to set it aside to work on other things for a while. I come back to it in 3 months or 6 months. And if it's just code, it sometimes takes me a while to remember what I did and why. But I found that if I do things like R Markdowns, it's much faster for me to pick up right where I left off and remember what I'd done and why. The why is oftentimes missing from your code, right? You might be able to look and see, okay, well, I filtered out this data, I made this plot, but you might not remember why from the code. And that's something you can include in the text of your R Markdowns. And so, yeah, these are really great, even if it's not for other people, but for your future self. Your future self would thank you for making sure you had all of your work really well documented like this. And that actually happened with this project. This project has been one where we've picked up some data, we've looked at it, and we've set it aside for the minute for a while. And then when we come back to it later, I've been very grateful to have like this all in this nice format. Okay, so this is a final product of what an R Markdown can look like, a published R Markdown. But how do we get to this point? So what you start off with using is an R Markdown file. So that's what you'd create as a first step, and what we will do in a little bit. So let me open up an example of that in Rstudio to look at. You can look at these side by side. But again, like I said, if you have questions or anything like that, please stop me and ask. Okay, so, okay, he's joining us again. Okay, so on the right side of my screen now, I opened up Rstudio, and I have open in this an R Markdown file. Make this a little bigger. And so, yeah, this is the R Markdown file that then generated this final published R Markdown. And so you can see here, you can sort of compare these two things and see how this stuff led to this stuff over here. You can see that there's some text here that shows up over here, and it's got some formatting. And we'll walk through how to create this formatting. This is done using something called Markdown. And then there's also these chunks of R code that are in this R Markdown. And so what happens is you create an R Markdown file like this, you put in the content that you want, and then it needs to be rendered into another type of file. And so I will go ahead and for that process of taking your R Markdown file and turning it into something else, like an HTML file, a PDF file, or a Word file or Word document, is called knitting. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this R Markdown and I'm going to knit it right on the fly. Okay, and then I have a window pop up. And so this is that R Markdown file rendered as an HTML file. And you can see as expected, it looks very similar to what I then published on RPubs. So publishing this is the final step. But the steps that we tend to spend the most time with are creating our R Markdown files and then knitting it to see what this final version of it looks like. Okay, so once you have this final version, you have your final rendered HTML or PDF or what have you. Well, not really so much with the HTMLs, but with PDFs. Those then you can save them and you can send them to collaborators via email or Slack. If you happen to use GitHub, you can publish your rendered R Markdowns on GitHub and share those links with other people. Or like I mentioned a few times now, you can publish these R Markdowns online using RPubs or Rstudioconnect, which are just two different platforms that we'll walk through. So there's a bunch of ways to take these final reports, or maybe not a final report, but an intermediary report, and share it with collaborators or bosses. Okay, so that is the basic process with creating R Markdowns. So any questions about this at this point? I should probably do a little reaction. Nope, we're all good so far. Okay. Hopefully that was fairly clear. Okay, so this is what most people use R Markdowns for. You create reports, you create basically a nice document of your research. But you can use R Markdowns then for other tasks or other more complicated things. So actually, for example, my notes for this workshop, I have put into an R Markdown, and I'll share the link to these with y'all later on. But this right here, I basically have an R Markdown that I put in all the notes for the materials we're going through here. So using R Markdowns for teaching is really helpful if you teach. One of the other uses that is really nice is you can actually use our Markdowns to create online books. And so you may have seen some of these if you've been poking around looking at our materials online, but this is an example of an R Markdown based book that I have used a lot lately. So this is the book on how to create R packages. And this book is actually just a collection of R Markdowns that are put together using an R package called Bookdown. And so if you look at some of these individual pages here, each of these pages is actually an R Markdown. And so you can see, for example, this one, it's got text, it's got some example R code. And so each of these pages is an R Markdown, and those are then glued together with a table of contents using Bookdown. So this is something that's really cool. It's fairly easy to set one of these up. So this is a great use of R Markdowns. Another example of something you can do with R Markdowns is use them use them while creating a website. So here's an example of, this is actually Heidi's website. Thank you for letting me use it. So yeah, there's another R package. This is called Blogdown that you can use to create a website like this. And you can put in whatever sections you want. But then if you choose to have blog posts like these are actually created from our Markdowns. Heidi, are you embarrassed right now? You don't need to be. So yeah, so this is another awesome use of these R Markdowns, is you can create these really great blog posts to share information with people and create a website like your professional website. And you can actually deploy these websites for free through Netlify too, which is pretty easy to use. Then there's a bunch of other things you can do with R Markdowns as sort of the basis. You can actually make presentations like slides with R Markdowns. I've never actually done that myself, but I know that it's possible. If you happen to use R Markdowns to write manuscripts, there's also tools for creating in-text citations for your manuscripts from a bibliography. So basically a nice way of like putting in your in-text citations throughout your paper that are then linked to the bibliography. And you can also create dashboards with our Markdowns. And so actually, hopefully at the end, if I have enough time and you'll stick around, I'll walk through an example of a little dashboard that I created using our Markdown that then has, it has some interactive Shiny components within it. Or I guess it has one interactive Shiny component. But yeah, you can, if you're familiar with Shiny, you can combine Shiny with R Markdowns to create these sort of interactive documents. So basically, R Markdown's awesome. It's the basis for a lot of other cool things that you can do to share your work with other people. And yeah, I highly recommend incorporating it into your everyday work. I mean, there are definitely times now where instead of starting a project with an R script, I actually start it with an R Markdown when I'm doing my initial data exploration. So yeah, it's really good to incorporate this into your daily R workflow. Okay, so enough talking from me. Well, I'll keep talking, but you guys now get to do something too instead of just listen to me talk. Let's go ahead and all together walk through creating an example of an R Markdown together. So if you want to go ahead and open up Rstudio. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Okay. So when everyone has Rstudio up and running and are ready to go, can you give me one of the little green reaction buttons? And if you need help, definitely unmute yourself or post something in the chat. Okay, I got a couple of green checks. Is everyone still with me? Yeah, okay. Oh, like I said at the beginning, if you haven't had a chance yet, we need one R package to do this work. And so if we do install that packages, R Markdown, if you haven't yet already, go ahead and do that right now. Okay, but I already have it installed, so I'm not going to run that. Okay, so the way, yes, and Heidi said that if anyone's having problems with the installation, let us know and the helpers can help out. Yeah, definitely we don't, one of the big barriers to using any of these tools is installation problems. And we don't want that to block anyone's work because it's not a good use of your time to fight with your computer to try to get things running. So definitely want to avoid that.
I did just have a participant from College of Medicine Phoenix have some permissions issue on their personal machine because it was through the College of Medicine's restrictions. So wondering if that'll come up here, but that didn't come up on our Markdown day, not till the blog down day.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, some sort of
Okay.
not the admin on your machine because it's a university.
Yeah, for particular R packages. Huh, interesting. I haven't seen that yet. But I think most of the life sciences folks, they don't have stuff locked down that much. So yeah, it'd be a pain. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new R Markdown. You can create a new R Markdown file just like you would with an R script. You can click on this new file button or the file tab and select the R Markdown option. And so once you do that, then you should have a window pop up where you can put in some information. You can actually just leave this the way it is and click OK if you want, or you can put information in right away if you're ready to put it in. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this document, and you probably should too, rodent report. Oh, and I'll just say really quickly, so as we're using a set of example data here, it's a data set that I'm very familiar with. That is a bunch of rodents that were collected in the desert, actually southeast of Tucson, a couple of hours in the Chiricahua Mountains. And so they basically collect rodents and they take some information about them and then let them go again. And so, yeah, there's a nice teaching data set based on that data. It's the site is referred to as Portal. And I've been out there a few times to collect data. It's actually pretty cool. So yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and use some example data from this rodent project. And so that's, I'm gonna call it rodent report. And you can see here, there's 3 options for how you then want to render your R Markdown. We're gonna leave it the default HTML for now. But then also if you want to create PDFs or Word documents, you can select these other options. These do, at least used to, and I think still do require installing some more software. So if you want to do this, let us know if you're having problems with getting it to work. But we'll start off with just the default HTML for right now. And so you can go ahead and click OK. You should have a new file pop up. So this is that R Markdown file. It's got the extension .rmd. And so this might be a little unusual looking to you, which would totally make sense because this is an interesting type of format. But basically there's this stuff at the top. It's a stub that's referred to as a Yamo stub. So everything between these 3 dashes, the beginning 3 dashes and end 3 dashes, this is basically metadata about your R Markdown. And so you can see this has been automatically filled in based on what you selected in the pop-up window. It's got the title that we put in, your name, assuming it default put your name in. If it didn't, you can change it here. That will put in today's date, and then it specifies the output that you want to render your R Markdown as. And then so everything below this little chunk at the beginning, this is all the actual content of your R Markdown. And so they put in some default stuff here. I mean, you can feel free to read through this at some point if you want. It's basically just some information about how to do this, but we're actually going to walk through a lot of these things together. So go ahead and delete all of the content below the second set of 3 dashes. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in some text about this rodent data, and we're going to read in some data and plot it. And so my notes sorted. Okay. And so while we're putting in this text, we can also add in formatting to the text that'll then make it look nice and pretty and easier to read when we render it. And so the way that we do that is we use something that's referred to as Markdown. So it's just a way of formatting plain text. And we'll walk through some different ways you can use our Markdown to affect how your text ends up looking. And so the first thing that we're going to start with is we're going to add our header. We're going to start off with our first section. It's going to be called purpose. And so the way that you indicate something's a header using Markdown is using pound symbols at the beginning of your line. So you put a pound symbol and a space, and then you can put the name or the title of the header. So we'll use purpose. And so the way that these pound symbols work to create a header is that the more that you put, the smaller the header gets. So the biggest header possible will have 1 pound symbol. And then if you put 3 or 4, it makes the header increasingly smaller. And so that's the way you can kind of end up with like hierarchical documents with subheaders. I'm actually going to put 2 pound symbols here for this header. Okay, and then we can put in some text about what we're doing. So we're just going to explore rodent data from the portal project is what we'll say. Just a simple sentence describing what we're doing here. Go ahead and type that in. If I'm typing too fast, please stop me and tell me to slow down. Okay, so one of the other nice ways you can format text using Markdown is you can italicize, bold, or strike through text. So basically a lot of the things that you can do for formatting text in like a Google Doc or a Word doc, you can also do with Markdown. And there are cheat sheets online for like all the different ways you can use Markdown to format text. But so let's say we want to take Portal Project and bold it. And the way that we do that is we put asterisks before and after the text that we want bolded. And specifically to bold something, italics is 1 asterisk before and after, to bold is 2. So I'm going to put 2 asterisks, well, not plus symbols, 2 asterisks before portal, and then 2 after project. And Rstudio is really nice because it's trying to help us know that we're actually doing something right. And so when you do that, when you change the formatting of some of your text, it turns the text blue, basically to tell you something is going on. Okay, so we've gone through a couple of examples of how to format our text. Let's actually render this Markdown and see what it looks like to see if it looks like we want it to. And so first, you need to save your R Markdown. And I'm going to just save mine on my desktop, but you should save it wherever you want, especially if you have like a workshop specific folder on your computer. And I'm going to call this R Markdown rodent report. You can call it, again, whatever you want. If you want to call it R Markdown workshop or something, go for it. And then save that. And so once your R Markdown in its current state is saved, you can go ahead and try and knit it. So hopefully you should see this knit button right here with a little ball of yarn next to it. If you don't, definitely do like a red check mark or a red X. I did it right with my hand, not with my mouth. So go ahead and click that knit button. Assuming everyone found it. Okay, and so we have a window pop up, and this is displaying the rendered version of our Markdown. And it's in HTML because that's what we specified in how we want it to be output. And so you can see this is the metadata that we put in is displayed at the top, and then we have our header, and then we have our 1 line of text, and then Portal Project is bold. This looks just like we were hoping for it to look. If yours does not look like this, definitely let me know. Or if if you got errors or something, definitely let me know about that. Okay. Anything so far? So far so good, I assume. Okay, so let's go back to our Markdown and let's add a little bit more formatted text. So one thing that you can do with Markdown too is create lists that look really nice. And so you can create lists that are numbered lists, or you can create lists that are unordered lists. So let's create a numbered list. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this list of tasks. It's sort of a little mini header. And then the way that you do a numbered list is you just start off with your numbering scheme, do a period and then a space, and then type whatever you want to type after that. And so our first task here is going to be load data from database. And then to add to this list, you just keep iterating the number in that same format. So you can add a second thing. The second thing we'll do is to clean data into time series. And then we'll add a third task, which is make plot. Okay. If everyone's had time to type that in. So this is, as I said, this is a numbered list. You can also create an unordered list. So to do that, you would just replace the number and the dot with either a dash or an asterisk, just for future information. But we're going to leave that a nice little numbered list. Okay, and then one of the most useful things that at least I use with Markdown all the time now is to change text into hyperlinks. So this is great. You can change whatever words you want into a link to a URL somewhere. This is awesome for documentation, for linking to information about projects or other publications or such. And so we're going to do an example of that here. Let's go ahead and turn this word database into a hyperlink to a page that has the data that we're going to be using. And so the way that you do that Markdown formatting is that you want to take the word or words that you want to turn to the hyperlink and you want to surround them in square brackets. So I'm going to put a square bracket at the beginning of the word database and then one at the end. And then the second step is to specify the URL you want. And so how you do that then is you put parentheses right after the square bracket. So no space, just square bracket parentheses. And then within the parentheses, you can put the URL that you want the link to go to. And so I have a URL for that I will put in the chat. Oops. And I'm not going to directly message that to Jessica. It's not helpful. Okay. So there's a link in the chat to the Figshare page that's about this portal database. So I'm going to also, you want to go ahead and copy and paste that into your parentheses. Okay, and then so to test if that worked, you can go ahead and knit again. And you might notice that every time you click the knit button, it'll save your document first. Okay, and so if that worked, then you should have your new ordered list. And then this database word should be a link. So you should be able to click on it. Oops, open on another page. If you click on it, it should open up this web page. Oop, I got a thumbs up. If that worked for people, yeah, go ahead and give me a thumbs up or a green check or something. Let me know. Or if that did not work for you, let me know. Sweet. Awesome. Okay. So that's just some of the possible things you can do with Markdown. There are others. If you just go to Google and you search for Markdown cheat sheet, for example, you can find resources for other things you can do with Markdown. So this is an example of one. So you can see it shows you how to do headers, bold, italicize, some of the things we covered, turn things into code chunks. Yeah, there's some other, create a table. So this is the type of format I use to create a table that was in that example Markdown that I showed earlier. Actually, no, I used something else for that. But you can create tables with Markdown. Oh, and this is actually a Markdown functionality that I use really often, which is creating these checkmark lists. So you can actually create like check boxes and then you can actually check them off when you're done with tasks. That's pretty nice. Yeah, there's a bunch of other options that you can use to format your text using Markdown. So go ahead and check those out when you get a chance.
Christine, I have a Markdown question.
Mhm.
I thought you were supposed to make numbered lists with just one repeated, like 1, 1, 1, but I tried it and your way works too. Do you know what the difference is or what I'm thinking of?
I did not know that you could do that. So like this, you make them all ones.
That's how I thought it was supposed to be done. And okay, if you knit it, does that work? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what,
Oh, wow. That's so
isn't
weird.
that strange? Yeah, I have no idea what I'm up to, but okay, just wondering if you knew. I'm gonna Google it.
Actually, so that could be really nice. If you don't know, like if you're going to be adding more things to your list and you don't know how long it's going to get, if you number them individually, you have to go back and like change the numbers manually.
Or
every time.
reorder them or something.
Or,
Wouldn't
yeah.
that be nice for an author list when you're always like changing that at the end of the paper and having to redo the superscripts? So annoying.
Yeah, definitely. I did not know that you could do that. I've never seen that before. That's a cool trick. Definitely seems like it would have its uses in some cases. Interesting. Okay, does anyone have any questions at this point? This is sort of how to format your text in your R Markdown using Markdown. So, and sorry, those words are so similar. Hopefully I'm saying them clearly enough. Markdown is what you use to format text. R Markdown is combining code and text together. So yeah, I wish the words weren't quite so similar. Okay, so we've done the first half of literate programming, which is put some text in here describing what we're doing. But we haven't done the second half yet, which is including code in our R Markdown. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll show you how to do that. So in my R Markdown, I'm going to go ahead and create a new header. And I'm going to call this header read in packages. And so for our first R code chunk, we're just going to read in a couple of R packages. And so the way that you do that is that you need to create a chunk in your R Markdown to indicate to the computer that this is something different than text. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. One way that you can do it is that there should be this little green box up here. If you click on it, it has some options for some different languages, but you just want to select the one with R. And then that should cause this sort of grayed out 3 lines to appear in your R Markdown. And then, so the computer now knows that anything that you type in here in this middle line is going to be R code. And so the computer, when it's knit, will run that as R code. It knows then it's not text, it's actually code. There's a couple more ways to insert R chunks. I don't remember. There's one way I wanted to mention and I'm not remembering right now. Oh yeah, so there's a keyboard shortcut. I don't know if anyone uses keyboard shortcuts often, but I use them a lot in R because it makes it faster to type because you don't have to go back and forth between your keyboard and your mouse as often. So the keyboard shortcut for that is on Macs, it's Command Option I. I assume on Windows it's Control Shift I or something. Here, let me actually look it up really quick. Yeah, if you've started doing a lot of, if you started working in Rstudio a lot, there's a bunch of keyboard shortcuts that are worth checking out. So I just Googled Rstudio keyboard shortcuts, and I'm going to the first link. And so there's like just a giant list here of different like things, operations you can do within Rstudio, but using your keyboard instead of having to click on stuff. And so, yeah, so there's a keyboard shortcut here for inserting a chunk of code. Yeah, so it's Control-Alt-I on Windows keyboards and Command-Option-I on Mac keyboards. That's one really nice way of inserting an R chunk. And then there's actually a third way of doing it. You can actually just type in these symbols. So the computer knows it's an R or it's a code chunk because it starts off with 3 backticks, ends with 3 backticks, and then has these curly braces with the letter R in it. So you can actually just type those out, like 3 backticks, curly brace R, and then 3 more backticks on the last line. So yeah, lots of ways to do things, just like with all programming. There's many, many ways to do stuff. Sometimes the number of options can be a little overwhelming, actually. So just do it whatever way is easiest for you. Yeah, don't let people try to strong arm you into like, well, this is the way I do it. This is the way you should do it. Like, do it the way that's best for you. Okay, so everybody should hopefully have this little R chunk here. And let's go ahead and actually put some code in here. So I'm going to read in 2 packages from the Tidyverse, which is, if you're not familiar with the Tidyverse, this is a collection of R packages that are really good for cleaning and visualizing data. Definitely worth checking out. How to use these packages is outside the scope of this current workshop, but we do teach people how to use these. So if you're interested, let us know. So I'm going to go ahead and read in 2 Tidyverse packages. I'm going to read in dplyr. And I'm going to read in ggplot too, just like that on 2 lines. Okay, and so we want to see if this is going to work. And we can do that by knitting this document and seeing what happens once you've typed in those 2 library calls. Okay, so when your knitted document pops up, you should see there are these are the lines of code that we typed in that are displayed on your report. And then this is also displaying some output from reading in that library. And so just like if you were to read this library into the R console, it's outputting some messages. And so there's a bunch of options with how you can display the code that you include in your R Markdown. And we're going to go over some of those options here in a minute. But we're going to make another R chunk first before we do that. Okay. Is everyone with me so far? If you're good, go ahead and give me a green mark or a thumbs up, or yeah, a visual thumbs up is totally great, whatever works. So, okay, cool. So let's go ahead and we'll create a second R chunk. Well, actually, I'm going to create a new header first. And I'm going to go ahead and call this header read in data. And we're going to go ahead and actually read in some of this portal data. So you want to insert a code chunk. You know, you can, like I said, you can use this little button up here and click R. And so we're going to read in data from a URL, and we're going to save our object as data. So we'll do data is our object, the assignment operator, and then we're going to do read.csv. And then we're going to put in a URL. So I'll, like before, I will copy this URL into the Zoom chat for everybody to copy and paste. Go ahead and copy that, and then you're going to want to paste it into quotes within read.csv. Okay. Oh gosh, what happened? Can you still see my screen? Okay. I don't know what I did. I don't want this over here. The little Zoom window moved.
No, we just see you talking to yourself. Everything's fine here.
Oh, okay. Wait, what?
I'm just joking. Yeah,
Okay.
we just see your Rstudio window as before. Nothing changed.
Okay, good. The little like Zoom window thing popped over on the other screen. Yeah. I don't want it there, but it is what it is. Okay, hopefully everyone's had a chance to copy that link and paste it in here. So that's going to create our data object, and then we're going to want to go ahead and on a new line, we'll just print out the first 6 lines of that data so we can get a look at it. And so you'll go ahead and knit that. Okay, and so if you look at your new knitted report now, you can see these 2 lines of code that we typed in, and then you can see the first 6 lines of the data set, hopefully, as long as that works. And so just so people have a little bit of familiarity, again, the point of this is not this particular data set. but it's helpful to know a little bit about the data that we're looking at for what we're doing. So each of the rows in this data set is an individual rodent observation. So each time they grabbed a rodent and measured it and weighed it and such. And so you can see that we've got the month, day, and year that each of those rodents were collected. They have a bunch of different fenced off plots out there. And so it identifies which plot the rodent was on. The species of the rodent and the sex, and then how long their hind foot is, and then their weights, which they didn't get weights here for some reason. I don't know. So yeah, this is a pretty big data set going back to the 70s. They've collected lots and lots of rodents over the years. Okay. So one of the things I mentioned is that you can do a lot of different things with these chunks of code to affect how they're displayed in your R Markdown. And so let's go ahead and apply some of these chunks to, or sorry, some of these options to the chunks that we've already created. And so one of the things we can do is we can make it so that these output messages from running the R code are not displayed. So if we go back to our Markdown, the way that you specify options for your chunks, and so these are going to be by chunk, is to go within the curly brackets and right after your R, put a comma. And then actually, before I even typed anything else out, it popped up with all the options. So these are all the chunk options. There's a lot of them. I don't even know what some of these things do, but feel free to Google to figure that out. But what we're going to do to prevent our report from having the messages from reading in the library shown, we're going to set message equals false. So the default is for message equal true, but let's say we don't want to display that output from reading in the dplyr library. So we set message equals false. And so we can see if that
question.
Yeah.
So for the message equals false, was that the things, the functions that were masked, like all of that text wouldn't show? Like what is the message that's being not shown, I guess?
It's in particular the outputs from running the code that are just the messages. So let me see if this is better. So if I just go to the R console and read in the dplyr library, like we did in our Markdown, it prints off, this is just a message. It isn't actually like any output from like running, you know, looking at a data frame or running some real code. It's just a message that the library read-in produces. And so this in particular is setting that this printing out of this message in our report as like don't show it. It still reads in the library, but it just doesn't print out that message in your report.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And so there are actually other options for doing things like, and I think I'll show one of these later, but there are options where you can do it so it doesn't show the code, but it still shows the code output. Or there are options where you can include our code, but not actually run it. So there's like a lot of flexibility. I know there's some that are related to how big figures are displayed in your report, in your knitted report. So yeah, this is just one of those in particular. There's another one I wanted to talk about. So let's go ahead and add a different option to the second chunk where we read in the data. So every time you re-knit this, okay, so this is actually important. So what's actually happening under the hood when you knit your document is that what Rstudio is doing is it is creating a brand new R session and it's running all of your code chunks in order from scratch. So every single time you knit, it's basically creating like a brand new fresh R instance and then running all of your code. And so, for example, if you've run anything, like if you created an object down here in your R console, like if you created, you know, this x equals 1 object, when you knit your document, that won't be available in the code that you run through knitting, because it's basically a brand new fresh R session. And so that means because we're pulling this data down from the internet every single time, that means every single time you knit this document, it's having to pull that data back down. And that can take up a lot of time, especially if you're pulling like, oh, at least this is a small amount of data, but if you're pulling a lot of data, it would take, you don't want to sit here for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour every single time you knit your document. So an option we can use to prevent that is cache equals true. And so what this does then is it pulls this data down once and then it saves it locally for you so that every single time you knit after that, it can just go ahead and reuse the data that's already been downloaded. So it's just a nice little trick that can work for certain instances. So yeah, if we knit this now, again, after we've changed or added those 2 options to our chunks. So remember on the first chunk, we set message equals to false. And so that message from reading in dplyr is now gone. And so it's nice for display purposes because that's not really useful information when you give somebody a report. And you can't see anything different about this second chunk, but that data now is cache that we've been downloading. And so hopefully every single time we knit this, it'll go a little faster. Okay. So that is our code chunks and how to modify them using options. And those are really super helpful. So go ahead and feel free to explore those later on. One of the last ways that you can actually run and display code outputs, and this is really, really nice. I use this regularly, is you can actually display outputs from running code within your text. So that might sound confusing. So let's go ahead and do an example of it, and then I can re-explain what I mean. Okay, so let's say we want to include a sentence here about how many unique species there are in this data set, how many unique rodent species. So let's go ahead and say we want to type in a sentence that is, the data includes X species. And so if you were to be working in, like, let's say a Word document and typing this up, and you'd include a sentence in your manuscript, like this data includes whatever number of species, you probably have to go figure out how many species there are in R, and then copy and paste that number into your Word document. But R Markdown makes this way easier because it'll do that work for you. So I'm going to replace this X with some R code. Oops, I don't want to do that. I'm just getting rid of the X. And so the way that you include basically like a tiny code chunk within your text is by doing one backtick, the letter R, some code, and then a backtick. And so I'll type that out. One backtick, an R, and then some code, and then another backtick. And so this tells the computer, this is R code. Just like this is an R chunk, and it says this is R code. This is another way to do that. And so we can type in some code, and we're going to type in code to count the number of unique species in our data frame. So you can do length, unique, data, $species _ ID. Okay, and so what this is doing is it's saying from our data frame called data, from the species ID column, print out the unique, or figure out how many unique species IDs there are. I have to remember a moment to type this out. Okay, and so once you've had a chance to type that out, so what this should do is actually, it should run this code and then produce the number in your knitted R Markdown. So let's go ahead and knit it and see if that's actually the case. Okay, and I scroll down and I see now I have a sentence in my report that just says the data includes 49 species. So the R Markdown took that code, ran it, and then printed the output in my report. And so this is basically like, I mean, some awesome magic. I mean, if you're like me and you've worked on manuscripts or whatever before, and you've copied and pasted numbers over, and then they change because you're, using a different subset of data, you're cleaning the data in a different way, you're wanting to display something else, you have to go back and like copy and paste all of that. And like, you might forget some of the instances where you did that. So this is an awesome way of getting this to like sort of update in a very automated way. Reduces errors, saves you time copying and pasting endlessly. So yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. And so yeah, you can only, so with this method of specifying R code, you can only include one line of code. So that's where like these R chunks are nice because you can do a bunch of different things at once. But yeah, this is great for including information about your data in your text. Okay, so stop there for a minute, see how everyone's feeling. Questions, thoughts, problems? Okay. Speak now or speak later, or speak anytime. Let me know how it's going. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to add, so this is a lot of the basics of using our Markdown. The last things that we're going to do is we're going to clean up this data just a little bit and then plot the cleaned up version of it. And this is basically just to show you like a more realistic example of what you'd be doing with an R Markdown with your data. Okay, so let me check my notes really quick. Yep, okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to create another header. This is the last one that'll be in this R Markdown. This one we're going to call clean up data and plot. Describe what we're doing. And then I'm going to include a little note about what we're doing with our data cleaning. So what we're going to do here is summarize data for number of occurrences per year and per species. So here's where we're going to use, so we haven't yet used these two tidyverse packages that we read in earlier, but this is where we're going to use them. So what we're going to do is we're going to use dplyr to basically summarize our data down. So right now our data set has one row per individual occurrence. What we want to end up with is a table that shows for each species and then each year is collected, how many individuals were collected. And so if you are not yet familiar with dplyr, it's all good. This will hopefully just be a few lines of code. And I can explain it if people want, or you can ask about it later. But yeah, so this is just using dplyr to dplyr functions to create that summarized data set. So we're going to go ahead and create a new R chunk. I'm going to call my new object time series. And then I'm going to take my data, my data frame that's called data. And then I'm going to use a pipe, which is part of the dplyr functions. And then I'm going to hit enter. And on the next line, I will do group by, which is a dplyr function. And then I'm going to group it by the species column and the year column. And then I'll just finish to the next line and then give people time to type this out or ask questions. I'm going to do another pipe, and then I'm going to summarize those columns. So basically count the number of occurrences for each species for each year. Okay, so stop for a minute if you're not familiar with dplyr. This pipe you can actually type. I use a keyboard shortcut for it, but you can actually type it out by doing %, greater than sign, %.
What's the keyboard shortcut for the pipes and piping?
Let me think.
Mine's Command-Shift-M. I'm on a Mac.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Sorry, I have a weird keyboard, and sometimes I have to.
I don't know what it is on a Windows.
Yeah.
You'll use that one all the time.
There's one for the assignment
I've been
operator
typing
too.
it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's not do that anymore. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. I used to type it too. For a long time, I typed it out by hand, and it's a pain. Okay, so hopefully everyone has had a chance to type out these 3 lines of code. So again, this is basically just to summarize our data set down into number of individuals per species and per year. And so like before, let's add another line where we just look at the first few lines of that new time series data frame, just to double check that it looks like what we want it to look like. And so you can go ahead and knit that. And then should hopefully see at the bottom what that time series data frame looks like. So you can see you've got a year column and a species column, and then the number of occurrences. And so in these years, there were species that didn't have a, or individuals that didn't have a species recorded. So that's why those are empty. Okay. And so our last step, now that we have the data that we want, at least for this example, is to go ahead and to plot, just do a very simple plot of these data. So I'm going to create another R chunk. Oh, I'm going to add a little bit of text above this called plot time series. So I have a little R chunk here, and I'm going to put in my plot. And so I'm going to use ggplot, which is another part of the tidyverse, to plot this. So if you're not familiar with ggplot syntax, that's okay. Just try to type what I have. I can also copy and paste it into the chat. But yeah, it's helpful to see code output displayed in this way. So that's why we're doing a plot. So ggplot is the function we're going to use. We want to plot the time series object. And so if you remember the 3 columns in time series, what we want to plot is on the x-axis is the year column, and then on the y-axis is that count column that we made. And so that needs to go within the AES function. X is year, Y is count. Okay, and ggplot is a little different than dplyr. What you use to sort of combine your steps is a plus symbol instead of the pipe. And we want to specify that we want to plot this as a line. And the last slightly more complicated step I'm going to do is that we want to create this plot by species. So 1 panel per species in the data. I'm going to use the facet wrap function for that. Tilde, species ID is the column name. Okay, here I will copy and paste this into the chat for folks. Okay, and again, tidyverse packages are not sort of the focus of this particular workshop, but we are happy to teach this material to people who would benefit from it. I mean, I find these packages super useful for working with my data, makes things a lot faster and easier. So let us know if you're interested. So I'm going to knit that to look at my plot. So if I scroll down to my report, at the bottom, we should see a plot here of by species, the number of occurrences by year. This is a little example. And so you can see, like before, this message was printed out when we did our code, when we ran this code. And so we can set message equals false on this chunk if we wanted to, if we don't want this displayed. Additionally, if you want to say you want to include the plot itself, but you don't want to include the code to create it, you can actually set the echo option equals false in order to get this to go away and just display the plot. Because there are going to be cases where you want to show like you want to show some plots and some sort of results of some statistical analyses to somebody, but they don't need to see the code because maybe they don't know how to code, or it's not relevant to that purpose. So you can create an entire report that doesn't show any code, but uses the outputs in the code. Okay, does anyone have any questions at this point before we move on to publishing? Nope. Okay. Okay, so congratulations. If you haven't before, or maybe you have before, but this is another example of it. You've created an R Markdown. And so this is a nice example. You can come back to it whenever you want to review how this worked. And so one of the things I talked about a lot in the beginning is then using this report as a way to share your stuff with other people, share your research with other people. And so how do you do that? So if you navigate to wherever you saved your R Markdown, so mine was on my desktop, you should see the R Markdown file. But then also there's this HTML file that has the same name. And so this is what is actually created. So when you knit the R Markdown, it creates this new HTML file. And so this by itself isn't super useful for sharing with other people. And you can share it, you can see it locally in the browser, but you can't, I don't think that you can really like email it to somebody and they can see your nice, pretty report. So one of the ways though that it's really helpful to share this sort of stuff with people is to save this as a PDF. And so you can try this if you want, but it might not work. You might get errors. But so basically you can change your specified output in your R Markdown by changing this to PDF_document. And so if I knit that really quickly, wait a couple seconds, should pop up. So we have this PDF that popped up, and this is actually a new file that was just created. So now if I go back to here, I can see that in the same location where my R Markdown is, there's now a new PDF file called Rodent Report. And so if you wanted, you could take that, you could email it to somebody, you could send it to them on like Slack or Teams or whatever. So you can pretty easily share this nice, pretty rendered version of your work.
If you try this, you won't be able to do this without installing LaTeX. So if you haven't done that already.
Yeah, if you try it, you might get errors right now, but we can help you through installing all of that. Be a little bit of pain. So yeah, that's one way that you can share the output of your R Markdowns. But one of the other ways, and that this is the way that we will recommend and I'll walk through right now, is you can actually publish your R Markdown online and then share the URL from where you published it with other people, so anybody can see it. And so there's two platforms you can do this on. There's RPubs and there's Rstudioconnect. And here, actually, I have a little pro-con table here that I made. Remember where I put it? Yeah. Okay. Remember that one. Oh, there it is. Okay, so yeah, so there's these two methods to publishing your R Markdowns, pros and cons to both of them. RPubs is nice because anybody can use it. It's free, made by RStudio. You can put anything that you want on there, including your coursework, because some classes now are teaching R Markdowns or using R Markdowns to teach. But one of the downsides to RPubs is that whatever you publish, you can't have someone else, make changes to it and publish it too. It's just one user per R Markdown. And then I have had some troubles in the past with like changing my R Markdown locally and then pushing the changes to RPubs. Maybe those things are fixed now. It might have been just some weird instances. The other platform that you can use to publish your R Markdowns is Rstudioconnect. And so the downside of that is that you need a license in order to use it. But luckily, University of Arizona has a license. So you can sign up for an account if you want to use that form. But another downside of Rstudioconnect is that we really only want, for the UA instance, we really only want to put research products up there. So only R Markdowns that are your actual research. But the benefits of Rstudioconnect is that you can have collaborators on your documents. And so you can both update the same document or the same R Markdown. And you can also schedule regular updates of your R Markdowns as you're changing them. So there are these two platforms. I was going to sort of quickly walk through and show everyone how to use both of these. And they are both fairly easy to do once you have them set up. Okay. Let me sign out something. Okay, so you have your report and you have your report here. And so this, you can try to follow along if you want with RPubs, but you're gonna have to sign up for an account. So it's probably best to just watch for right now. And then the instructions for what I'm doing are in the notes that I'll share the link to. Okay, so you have your finished R Markdown. I'm gonna change this back to an HTML and I'm gonna knit it. And then, so the way that you publish your finished R Markdown or partially finished, you don't have to wait until it's totally done, is there's this nice publish button up here. This is what you use for publishing on both platforms. So when I click on it, I actually see both options here. You probably will only see RPubs I think, because you have to set up your RStudio account, Rstudioconnect account. But so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this on RPubs, and then I'll put it on Rstudioconnect. So I click on RPubs, and then I'm going to go ahead and click publish. And this then will, a browser window will pop up. And then so the first thing that you have to do is you either sign into an account if you already have one, or you create an account. So that is one thing with RPubs, you do need to have an account with them in order to use this. But so I already have an account. I'm gonna go ahead and sign in to it. Okay, and then the second step for publishing this on RPubs is that you can put in some information about your document, or you can leave this stuff blank if you want. But I'm gonna go ahead and put a title in. Oh, I already did this once. Written report from workshop is what I'm gonna call this. And then you can put in a description if you want. And then additionally, this, you can modify what the URL is like for your RPubs document. I'm gonna leave this as it is for right now. And then I can go back and change it in a minute. And I'm gonna hit continue. I think it said continue. Oh, it said save changes. Okay, and that's it. I now have my report that I just made is online, somewhere that anyone can look at it. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. And so the format for the URL from RPubs is rpubs.com/your username, and then / and it'll give you a number, a sort of random, not randomly generated. I imagine these are incremented, but a number for the last bit of the URL. So I will note that when you create your account, remember that your username for your account is what's going to be part of the URL. So choose judiciously. I did not maybe choose very judiciously using my username from when I was in high school. But yeah, like I said, you can also change what this last bit of the URL is if you want. And so the way you change all of those things is there's this edit details button in the lower left-hand corner. If you click on it, this window pops up again. And so right here, you can enter whatever you want. So you could call this, you know, rodent example. Can't do that because I already made that. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to type in rodent example to my URL. So when I save this, now you can see there's a new URL that's customized to what I did. So that's a really neat, really nice way to sort of make a super user-friendly URL for your published document.
Tell me, does 316 mean you just had a birthday?
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I should really get away from using that as my account name. My high school nickname. Okay, so that is how to publish in RPubs. Did anyone try that and have success already? It's okay. I don't expect anybody to have. Takes a minute to sign up for the account. I imagine you have to do like an account validation and stuff like that. But everyone should do that when you get a chance if you want to use RPubs. Okay, so the second method for publishing this is on Rstudioconnect. And so I assume probably no one here has an account on Rstudioconnect yet. That's totally legit. I wouldn't think you'd have that already. But if you want to sign up for an account on the UA server, there's this website here. It's linked to in the notes about our UA instance of Rstudioconnect. And at the bottom is a button right here where you can request access. You can sign up for an account there and someone has to approve you. So I've already signed up for an account. And so once you've signed up for an account, then you have to connect your RStudio to the Rstudioconnect server. And so the way you do that is, and again, this is in the notes, so don't worry about writing it down if you don't want to. But if in Rstudio, you go to tools, and then down to global options. There's this toolbar on the left side that there's a publishing option. And so yours will probably be empty. There'll be nothing here right now. You have to click connect. And then click Rstudioconnect as the option. And then you put in the server name. And so I've already done this, so I'm not going to do it again. It does like duplicate it or do something weird because I tried it once before. But once you've connected successfully to the UA Rstudioconnect account or server, then you should have this sort of thing show up here. And so that means you're successfully connected. So once that happens, you can publish this basically in the same way as we just did on RPubs. So you can knit your document. And now it says republish because I've already published it once. And I'm going to go ahead and publish this at another destination. And now this time I'm going to select Rstudioconnect instead of RPubs. Okay, and then it gives you two options here. The first is publish document with source code, and the second is published finished document only. So there are pros and cons to both of these. For the first option, this might take longer because it will take your R Markdown and render it for you. But then you know that it's up to date. So if you forgot to knit your document before you tried to publish this, then this will kind of catch that for you and get you the most recent version. But it is faster to the second option where it will just knit, or it'll upload what you've already had knitted most recently. So I'm going to select the second option, and then I'm going to click publish. So this will take a moment, and a new browser window pops up. I'm already logged in. Maybe I wasn't logged in. Oh, there we go. Okay. And so again, in just a few steps, I have my R Markdown. It is now published in a second location on Rstudioconnect. So there's a URL here. It's not as pretty as the other URL. It's got some random numbers and letters. But this can also pretty easily be shared by giving someone else this URL. You do have more control over who can see the things that you've put on Rstudioconnect too, because you can make it so that only people with Rstudioconnect accounts can see. Or you can say only certain people, even within that group, can see your published report. So if you are trying to publish something and share something that has, like, you know, private data or something like that, that is possible. So.
And you can customize the URL down on the lower right-hand side there a little bit.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, the first part has to stay the same, the viz.datascience, but you can, like, the part that comes after the .edu, I think.
Oh,
yeah,
oh, that's cool. Okay, I didn't realize that. I hadn't poked around with this enough yet. So
it's only a little, like, I mean, it's still long, and no one would, like, just type it in probably, but.
Oh, wait, copy, enter, save.
Yeah.
So now if I take this URL and go to it with my modified URL. Ah, neat. Okay, I didn't know that. That was really helpful. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
So yeah, you can customize URL for both options to some extent.
And you had me stressing big time about sending HTMLs, like that I couldn't do that, but I think you can for some knitted Markdown, R Markdowns. They can still be just the HTML, like sent it in the body of an email to someone. I don't know when that stops happening because I've made a slide deck before and you definitely can't just share the slide deck, right? The HTML, it doesn't work, but I just, yeah. So there must be, if it's just text and R code, that you can still just email it to someone. No clue.
Huh. Interesting. I guess I haven't really tried to share like the HTMLs themselves with anyone, so I wasn't really sure what was possible. I figured if you send an HTML to somebody, they'll just see like the raw, like, you know, all the weird, like greater than less than symbols and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
So,
it seems to render.
and it does render it.
Yeah.
Nice.
I must be. Could you imagine? I'm submitting all these weekly reports to my boss and they're just like raw HTML.
Okay, I'm glad that wasn't the case. Sorry to freak you out.
I know. It scared me. I was like, oh no.
I should be more careful of what I say.
No. It was just funny.
We're always learning things from each other, even when we think when we do use the technology, like it can be used in so many ways.
Yeah, I had never done any of this publishing. This is all new to me.
I learned very recently that on Rstudioconnect, you can connect it to a repository. So, you know, Kristina has it locally on an R script locally, but if that'd been a repo that she then pushed the changes to a repository, on Rstudioconnect, you can pull the repository in. And then if you change it, it'll automatically update. It'll like check the repo for changes and then republish it if you add to it or you make edits to it.
Yeah, that's how my Netlify website is too. It just automatically republishes the website when I push anything to my GitHub. It's super.
And people can collaborate it, like, because Kristina and I work together on a lot of projects. So whereas like handing over the R Markdown would be weird, or like who, like then we would always have to like, oh, you always publish it, but sometimes one person's out of town and the other person needs to do something, whatever. That didn't just happen recently. But yeah, if each person has permissions to like push the same repository or merge them or whatever, then doesn't matter who does it, as long as the repository is up to date, the publication will be updated.
Yeah, and I think with RPubs, you have to do all of that still manually, like click the republish button. So yeah, there's definitely some nice functionality to like the auto updating in our Rstudioconnect. There's a reason we pay for it. I think also more people can handle traffic to these. So if you have a lot of people looking at your R Markdown for some reason, I think that our Rstudioconnect can handle a lot more people than RPubs. Okay, so I want to took a little longer than I expected, but not too much longer. We've gone through a bunch of stuff now. So we've talked about what an R Markdown is, what you use it for. We've walked through creating an example of one, including a lot of the little nitty gritty details that you can include. And I've walked through a couple of ways to publish your Markdown. Okay, and so as I said in the advertisement for the workshop, this is a bring your own code type of event. And so we're going to spend the next, say until 10 till, so the next 15 minutes, I would like everyone to take some time to take some pre-existing R code that you already have, or make something kind of up on the fly, and create a new R Markdown. So yeah, go ahead and create a new R Markdown file, add some text to it, add some code to it, save it and knit it. And then if you have time, and we only have 15 minutes, so that probably isn't enough time, but if you have a little bit of extra time to then attempt to publish that on RPubs, you could go ahead and do that if you want. So yeah, and we'll be here hanging out to answer questions, troubleshoot. If people need like extra help, especially with installation stuff, we could go into a breakout room. This is your time to actually take this stuff that I've been showing you and try to actually use it for your own work. So yeah, if you have questions, let me know, and we will do our best to help.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was able to write it as a PDF, and I opened it, and let's see, and it looks like the figure is like the margins are wrong, like it cut the figure off. Do you know how to fix that if you're writing to a PDF?
But specifically to a PDF. So I know there are there's ways you can change the margin using the options.
Okay.
So just to clarify, when you publish to HTML, it doesn't have those same issues?
It did not, no.
Yeah, publishing to HTML is always the easiest. If you can get away with it, always use HTML. PDF's gonna break everything. Word is like,
okay.
I'm not saying don't do it. I do have resources for that. I'll pull them up, but if you can get away with it, use HTML until you can't anymore. Those PDFs are really tough.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Let me see what happens with Word.
But I think you might have to install other software to get. I don't think I've ever knit anything to a Word document before, because I think I had problems installing the stuff that would run it.
It works on Word. So I could convert the words to the margins are correct in Word, so I could just save it as PDF.
Is there a particular reason you need it to be PDF? I guess this is also part of it. Like, I know there's the options, and I know that HTML is the easiest. So I've always kind of stuck with that.
Yeah, just the people that I'm working with, I think that they would be the most comfortable opening a PDF in Acrobat. And then that way I don't have to spend time tutoring them on what they're looking at. They can just open it up. So yeah, just for like ease of sharing with the audience that I'm working with, I think PDF would be best. But it looks good as a Word document, and then everything writes. I wrote the Word document as a PDF, and everything looks good. So
Oh,
Thank
so you
you.
then saved it like manually as a PDF.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
Huh.
I don't know if it's not sensitive information, maybe you could also publish it on our pubs or something and send a link. I don't know if people are comfortable like just clicking on a link and reading a report, or if it's they want to save for their own, like if they want a copy that they own kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the data that we had to get like permission, like a national data set where we had to get certain permissions. So I have to be pretty careful about like who's seeing what.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Savannah, I'm in the same boat. My PI would not look at anything besides a Word document. So I totally understand needing to knit to different places. You'll probably, if you want to use this, have to knit to Word sometimes and PDF other times. So that'll be a neck ache for you, but you can get used to it. I sent the PDF
one?
links here. So 3.3.2 is the figure settings. But then I also sent the package Office down, which super helps you integrate Microsoft Office products within your R Markdown. So using
Oh.
Excel easier, using Word easier, and then being able to move back and forth between those things. I've found this package super helpful.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
I hadn't heard of Office Down. Good resources. Okay, it is now 10 till. Were folks able to make some progress on creating a new R Markdown? Anyone want to share their successes with us or their challenges? I know it wasn't very much time to work on something, but if you were able to create a new R Markdown and feel okay about it, do you want to give me like a green check or thumbs up or something? Got a yes. Got a couple yeses. Heidi said yes. An expert on R Markdown. Glad she's able to create one. Okay. Probably no one was able to publish it yet on our pubs, I assume. Yeah, it was a little bit ambitious for the amount of time that we had. But yeah, again, I have the notes for this session, and so if you want to go through and try that, you can refer back to those to be able to do it. So the last little thing that I wanted to show everyone before we are done, we've got 9 minutes, so it should be enough time, is just showing an example of one of these things that you can use in R Markdown for that goes beyond just the basic R Markdown. And so I had never done this before. Well, I taught this workshop last October, I think. And so I'd never really done this, used R Markdown in this way before. And so this is just sort of a little simple example that I put together. But basically I use the same rodent data from this example, R Markdown that we made to make a little dashboard. And it was actually surprisingly easy to throw together. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new R Markdown here, and I'm going to copy and paste in my R Markdown content for that dashboard. Yeah. Okay. And I'll first show everybody what this looks like, and then we can talk very briefly about what the components are in the R Markdown itself to create this thing. So I'm going to save this first. It takes a minute. Probably use the shiny stuff, I assume. Okay. So yeah, the R Markdown reports, like we had talked through earlier, are really nice for something that's kind of like a, you read through chronologically from beginning to end, more like a manuscript. But yeah, you could do things like create a dashboard, which is more of this sort of like visual, like different boxes where you can put different things in. And so yeah, I just threw together a couple of example types for these different boxes. So I have this little count here of the number of species, which is 49, which we had in the other R Markdown. Also the same plot. I put the same plot in here that we created is in one of these sort of boxes on this dashboard. There's a little text box here that you can put information in. And then I did add one shiny component to this dashboard. And so this right here, something is a shiny component because it's something that's more interactive. You can do something to it to cause it to change. And so what I did here is I displayed the first 6 lines of the data set by year, where you can then change what year you're looking at. So the default year is 1980 here that I set it at, but you can put in whatever year you want here and then display the first 6 lines of that, the data for that year. So basically filtering this data by year. So yeah, this is super cool. I mean, it didn't take me a super long time to put this together, and I'm not by any means a shiny expert or even an R Markdown expert. So it's cool that it's something that's fairly flexible and useful pretty quickly. And so yeah, the R Markdown that I put together for this, I had to specify. So the Flex dashboard is the R package that is used to create this. And so I had a read in Flex dashboard to make the dashboard itself. And then I also had a read in shiny to make that one box that had the shiny component to it. And then I had a little R chunk where I read in the data and created that data time series, the time series data frame. And then this was split up. The way this works, I guess, is it's split up by columns. So I had column 1, which is the 2 boxes on the left, and column 2, which is the 2 boxes on the right. And then just, I think these different headers determine how many boxes there are. So I had 2 in each. And then I use these different functions to display that little box with the number 49 in it. Created the plot in another one, put in some text in that one in the upper right-hand corner, And then this is the little code chunk to do the little Shiny component. So these are Shiny functions here to display the data set based on input from the user. So yeah, it was pretty fun to make this little thing. And yeah, I mean, I'm somebody who has, you know, if you have data that you need to present to people in a more, I guess, like businessy sort of way, or to lay people to, probably this would be a really good way to do that. And it seems like it's pretty flexible. I'm sure if you want to do very specific things with like sort of how it looks or how it's arranged, you might have to, it might get kind of complicated very quickly, but to do something fairly straightforward like this, it was actually pretty easy. So yeah. Definitely. So part of this is like the motivation, like it's a great idea to understand our Markdown and how to use it, because then you can leverage it into doing these other more complicated tasks, which are really not too terribly complicated as it turns out.
Hey, Kristina, could you show the Shiny part of this? The code?
The code?
Again? Yeah.
So is this right here? So this is how you, like you specify the user input, I think is how that works, like what the user can change. And then that's linked to this, which it displays the table. So it takes the data, and I'm only showing the first 6 lines here. And then it's filtering. So this is dplyr, it's filtering.
I do recognize that from Shiny, but you didn't have to load the Shiny package.
I did up here.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. So those are directly from, yeah. So that's interesting. That's actually this, what it looks like. I just looked this up. It looks like it's something of a gateway drug to doing a Shiny app.
Oh yeah,
but it is a Shiny app. So I'm like, my head is still.
I just took the drug. I've never seen this before, and I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna build it later today.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I've never heard of the Flex dashboard, but you know, Shiny. Well, actually, okay. So another plug for our Rstudioconnect license. It is agnostic to what you're trying to do, right? You could render the HTML. You could run a Shiny app. I'm sure this would go on there as well. So whether you have your Shiny app, you have a whatever, it can all be hosted on Rstudioconnect.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. And yeah, I didn't really think about it, but this is a way to do Shiny that's a lot simpler. Because when you do just a standalone
pieces of Shiny, if you don't want to like
the whole
if you
shebang,
want to drink the whole Kool-Aid, you don't quite want to go there. You can do like little sips maybe.
Yeah,
of the Kool-Aid.
I didn't even think of it that way, but that is a good possible way to start figuring out what you can do with the little
I feel like we could have a work, just brainstorm for future, Kristina. We could have a workshop that is this like gateway introduction, multiple ways to do interactive plots. Perhaps.
Yeah, and like a lower barrier sort of way.
Yeah, Jeff Oliver has a great lesson on Shiny apps, but it is really overwhelming, like all of the syntax that comes with Shiny.
Yeah.
And you have to, if you don't connect to the two parts the right way, like it just doesn't work. And anyway, so.
And I think that this might be, I don't know, I can't remember. I'm not a Shiny expert again, but I think this might be possibly like these would go into, if you were creating a Shiny app, I think these two parts would go into two different the two different scripts that you build a Shiny app
functions, right?
So, yeah.
And there's a lot of options. What I learned about Shiny is there's a lot of options of doing things. Like to do the same thing, you could have slightly different functions in slightly different places. And for a learner, a novice like me, for someone trying to learn, it's great that there's flexibility, but when you're trying to learn, knowing that there's multiple ways to do something is just like really overwhelming. So this looks like it's a bit more constrained because it's not in those two separate functions. It's not wrapped like 3 levels deep into something. It just is.
Just all there.
It's just right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So cool.
Yeah. So there we go. It's more motivation there. Okay. So we are about at the end of our time, and I don't want to hold people any longer. I do want to post the link to the notes in the chat. And so again, I have all the notes for the material that we went through here. This is in a GitHub repository, but it's rendered R Markdown, so it should be easy to read. Everything that we went through today, including at the bottom, there's a bunch of links to different resources. And then if you want more help with this stuff, or you want to talk about any sort of data science tools or problems in your research that you're having because of data issues and things like that, feel free to ask us for more help. You can email us. We have office hours every week on Tuesday mornings. Yeah, we would love to help everyone with anything that is stymieing their research that data science tools could help you solve. So yeah, we want to basically be a resource to campus. So tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell everyone. And Heidi too. Heidi's also not in our group, but in the data science, you're in the Data Science Institute, right?
Yes,
So,
and
yeah.
I'm going to shameless plug my own R Markdown workshop now. That's in a couple weeks, but if you didn't get enough or you want more, just come through, and mine's going to be a little bit more focused at the health sciences. I'm going to demonstrate a survival analysis and how I do that reproducibly. So yeah, tell your friends to pull up.
Woo. Awesome.
Where are these events listed? Is it the calendar that was referenced at the beginning on the poll, or?
Lots of them can be found on this events
should
page
be.
here. Yeah, right at the Data Science
No.
Institute.
Okay, perfect.
But I think
Okay.
the libraries might be a better, not better, but more inclusive place to find resources for computing. Christina and Jessica, do you guys know?
I'm not even on the
Unfortunately,
listserv for the libraries, but the Slack
No.
is very active, and
True.
I learn about most things from the Slack.
the UA Data Science Slack, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one.
This is one of the challenges with on campus. We have a lot of people doing a lot of good work, but we are kind of like scattered a little bit. So we're trying to figure out how to get everybody to coordinate a little bit more and condense our information so that people can find what they're looking for, because it can probably be very overwhelming to know who to go to.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the UA Data Science Slack is you can add yourself. That's the one that like is pretty democratic. Everyone who is interested can add and then can post, share, yeah, and spread the word, right? Like we're kind of reliant at least a little bit on word of mouth at this point, since there isn't one single source of information.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to hold anyone any longer. So thank you everyone for attending. This was awesome. Hopefully you got some value out of it, and let us know if you have questions or want to talk more. Yeah, we'll see y'all later.
Great job, Christina.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for helping.